Hi guys, welcome to another Instagram Live for OCD recovery. I'm going to be talking a little bit today about some of the things that stop people getting better, some of the things that are not only stop people getting better, hurdles, but where people, the level that a lot of people get to in the journey of OCD recovery. So I'm going to go through a few of these. Giving up once they feel some relief. This is the most common one. So people go to therapy, to coaching all over the world, and they go in for some sessions. They're in a real state of panic, really stuck. And after a couple of sessions, or maybe after a few months, or maybe after a few years, they get better and they feel relief and they're able to function and live life again. Once they get to that stage, what normally happens is they think, well, this is as good as it's going to get. I'm happy with this. I'm going to leave it there. And they end up just leaving it at that position. And this is a terrible shame because they were so close to moving to recovery, but because they get to a certain point and then they think, I can function here, this is enough, I don't want to do any more work on it, I don't want to waste any more time to OCD. That's a common thought. I don't want to waste any more of my life or time to OCD. They get to that point and they stop. And that is a real shame, because that is where they've then got the energy to learn and do the work now that they're out of that crisis point to move forward. That is one of the main things that happens. Second thing is scared to have a session with their therapist because they're scared of getting stuck again or making it worse, digging down into it. And they feel like, now that I'm feeling good, I don't want to think of anything to do with OCD. I don't want to even touch on that subject. And they're trying to avoid that. And that avoidance then is what sets up another crisis point, because by avoiding, they're then leaving themselves vulnerable to getting caught again. You don't want to avoid. Say, look at me, for example, in what I do here is I'm hearing every single thought, all different people's thoughts all day long. I'm around OCD all day long. I'm recovered. It doesn't make any difference if I hear the scariest thoughts or I'm around it for as many hours as possible. It doesn't make any difference because it doesn't scare me. My relationship with the thoughts or the content of the thoughts or anything. So that's why it doesn't get a grip. So I'm facing it all the time. It doesn't make a difference. Another one is jumping therapist to therapist, going from one therapist to the next, expecting a miracle result. So going in there, hearing something, if you haven't heard everything that you want to hear, or you feel better, or you test and think, am I feeling better? Or is that similar to what I've already heard before, jumping ship to the next therapist and the next and the next. So it's like if you set up a business. I mean, the reason most businesses fail, or why it never happen, is because people have good ideas, are a million of. There's so many people have a good business idea, but it's the execution. And that's exactly the same with OCD recovery, in the sense that if you go from therapist to therapist, like, oh, okay, I'll try that, oh, I'll listen to those ideas, try that briefly, and then I'll jump to this one, try that briefly. It's like setting up 1,000 different businesses. They're not going to work. You need to concentrate on learning the things that you're learning, giving it time with each person, going for one session, seeing if you're suddenly better or if everything clicks. That is not the attitude to go with. It's so commonly done, but it's not the answer. And it's a reason that people then lose a lot of hope, because they've never sat it out long enough to see. But at the same time, don't sit it out with somebody who's not getting you anywhere. If you're sitting with someone and you've noticed no improvement, no change in knowledge, no anything, you need to get a second opinion straight away, because that's far too commonly done. Sitting with a therapist who's not making improvements with you, and you end up just sitting through it because you think, well, maybe they're probably right, I'm probably not. I'll just carry on with them and see how it goes, and I'll eventually get there. Well, 90% of people treating OCD haven't got the tools to get the person fully better. So unless they've got those tools, most of the time you're going to miss out. So it's very important to get a second opinion. Exposures. Another super common one is when you get to an exposure where you'll get to a point in the road where the only way forward is by doing that exposure. Now, if you don't do that exposure, there'll be one particular exposure. Let's say, for example, HIV fear. And you'll get to a point where you might have watched loads of documentaries on HIV, you might have read loads of things about it, exposed yourself in every other way. And the exposure that's needed is like to go to a STD clinic or to pick up some brochures that people have been touching in the hospital that say HIV advice on, things like that. There comes a point where those exposures are absolutely crucial, where that is the stepping stone to getting you better. Now, there's so many of those. Contamination OCD, there is no other way around contamination OCD apart from putting yourself in the position of getting a bit dirty, touching the things you don't want to touch, the bin, inside the bin, all that kind of stuff. And you will come to a point where that is what needs doing. And people beg all the time with me, oh, is there any other way? Can I read a book? No, that is what has to be done at some point. That is what's holding you back. And you have to look at your life and take a deep look at it and go, this is holding my life back. This is stopping me living. This is not the life I'd want to live. I can't let this take my life. Do not get stuck in the comfort trap of staying behind that illusionary fear wall. So many do, and they never move past that point, and their whole life is limited at that point. You can definitely do it, but you have to have a strong talk with yourself about how important that is for you to go and do that. That is the biggest thing that holds so many people back. It gets to a point where it feels completely life and death, that, say, touching a bin, for example. That's because of how your brain has learnt to recognize it. There is no easy way around that. And there are going to be times where you're going to have to white knuckle it like on a roller coaster and go for it, because you can't have gradual progression. And people will say there must be some easier way. There isn't at certain points. There is no gradual progression. You will have to take the leap at certain points. So that is so crucial. There will be tons of therapists out there that will try and make it slower and slower, and the progression could take years for that person to get better. Instead of, you can actually make that progress when you really take leaps. I've seen people take massive leaps early on in their journey because they've come to me and they've said, I really want to do this now, Rob. I'm fed up of living like this. And I've seen people go and make the biggest moves possible. But you've got to face those fears. If there's something that's holding you back, ask yourself, is this the life I want to live? And when I'm 90, looking back at my life, and I look back at my life and look at a period of number of years of having OCD, will I look back and go, I gave it my all, that's the way I wanted to spend that time that I'd got on this rock floating through outer space, that little bit of time that we've got on this earth, I wanted to spend it all the time held back by that. I completely understand 100% the difficulty, the challenge in doing those exposures. I know it from my own experience, putting it off, waiting till you're comfortable. Comfortable doesn't come. You have to, at a point, go for it. There is no other way. Okay, let me have a look at any of these questions, if there are some here. Let's have a look. My counsellor left and they never got me a new one. Yep, sadly, that is very common. You will have to be proactive and go out and try and find another counsellor. Do not wait. That is the other most important point. Do not wait. If you're on the NHS system in the UK and you're waiting months and months and you can't even function, you want to be looking at trying to speak to them to make it an absolute priority. If they can't make it a priority, try and find someone on a sliding pay scale where someone will offer you some kind of discounted rate, because your privates can be expensive. Try and do that. It's very important you get going and moving forward. OCD will convince us that, we can do it on our own. It's safer to just read the books. It's safer to stay in the comfort zone. We'll get there. But you won't. You do have to get somebody to help you. Trying to do it on your own is extremely hard. Even if you read all the books on my reading list, putting it into practice without help from me, help from somebody who really understands OCD, it's very, very difficult, because there's so much that goes with it. You need to really understand the theory. You need to really do the behavior work. You need to commit to it. You need to see the changes. You need to learn how to adapt to it. It's pretty difficult. It's very, very, very difficult on your own. I think that if you really can't afford therapy, and there's no way you can reach out to doing it privately, you've got to be really strict with the reading. You've got to ask for help on what exposures you can create for yourself, and you've got to stick to that plan, because otherwise it's very, very easy to end up in that situation where you get to a point where you're functioning and then you just sit there, or you get to a point where you're not functioning, you're in crisis, but then you feel like you're completely out of hope constantly, and it just becomes a cycle of going from med to med and higher doses of meds. A life with OCD should not be for anybody just high doses of meds, not moving forward, just functioning or just floating along. When you understand things, and you see things and learn things and practice things and are persistently practicing, you do not have to be in that situation. That is something from the past. You do not need to be in a situation where you can't live your life at all. Meds is the only option. You barely have made any progress with therapy and learning things, because that's not the case. It's because it's been delivered wrong. If it's delivered right, it will make a significant change. It makes a significant change when you see your beliefs. You could be on anxiety, will cut through anything. It will cut through anything. It can cut through heartburn tablets making you have acid reflux. It will cut through the meds. It can cut through diazepam, Valium. It can cut through the whole bloody lot. It does. That's what it does. So you need to really think what's going to get under all of this. And getting under all of this is changing your beliefs, changing the way you see things, changing your perspective, so that those irrational where you jump from A to Z so quickly is slowed down. That's what's so crucial. My therapist doesn't do ERP. Without exposure for so much of OCD, exposure is just facing fears. It's been around since the beginning of time. It's not a magical term that explains something in some special way. It's facing your fears and sitting with it till you see that it's not scary and you feel the anxiety come down. That's all it is. Now, if you've got a therapist who's not doing exposures with you, and your OCD specifically relates, which 90% of them do, to doing some kind of exposure, that doesn't mean if you haven't been set exposures that you definitely need it. In a lot of times with OCD, it isn't. But I'm saying in certain situations, like for example, contamination OCD without exposure is not possible. You can't do that. So in that case, it's pretty much 100% you're going to need exposure. A lot of others, sometimes you don't. If there's certain existential fears, we'll do exposures, yes, watching films, documentaries, and so on. But it's not so much direct exposure always needed. But in a lot of cases, you're in a situation where it's going to be 90 to 100% that you're going to need that exposure for a lot of OCD. And if you've got a therapist who's not doing it, then it's going to be very, very tricky. Well, very, very tricky, not possible. Let's make this clear. There is no way with contamination OCD, without exposure, you can't get better on a certain level. That's not me being mean about it. That's me highlighting the importance of the facts, so people are very aware of that. If I'm scared of touching the dustbin, I could read every book on OCD out there and change all my perception of dustbins and fear relating to contamination. But until my brain realizes that dustbin does not kill me and that can feel it and see that, it doesn't come down. You've got to think of the brain like a baby, like a kid. It needs to be brought along and shown. It needs to be taught this isn't scary. And until it's done, it thinks it is. So that's a really important part. Does CBT really work? Absolutely, it's the gold standard. CBT, what is it? Greek and Roman philosophy from the Stoics and so on showed us that our beliefs, only what we think, our perception, is what makes us anxious. So when we see things rationally, there's nothing to be anxious about. CBT was created by Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis. They packaged up what was already in place from Greek and Roman philosophy, Buddhism and so on, all these different concepts that were there, they packaged it up mainly from the Greek and Roman philosophy, packaged that up neatly into the form of CBT, which allowed us to show, allowed it to be into a much easier to understand model to get directly into the source, into the anxiety. And that's what it is. Facing fears, seeing things aren't scary, having a good understanding of why nothing is scary, only our perception of it when it makes it scary. So that is the gold standard for OCD, breaking that down. So does it work? Well, because it's based on reality. It's a scientific evidence-based reality of seeing things aren't scary and seeing things for what they are. Like a spider is a small animal trying to just survive its life that happened to be born in that body. It's not terrifying, our life's going to end if we hold it, which we imagine with arachnophobia, and seeing that, learning that, holding ones, and so on, gets us over that fear, that irrational fear. Now, does that work? Absolutely. That's reality. All it is reality, seeing things for what they are, that they are not scary. So that's the key there. So it's not a question of does it work or not, it's just reality. It works. But the reason sometimes people say, oh, CBT didn't work for me is because they never gave it long enough time to do it, one, or two, they didn't understand it. When you don't understand it, you could spend 5 years doing it and it hasn't been delivered to you so you understand it and see it and it makes change, then obviously you're going to think it didn't work for you. So it does work. It just needs to be, one, implemented correctly, two, enough time, and three, going through practice and persistence, and that's what gets people better. Would you suggest that people have an OCD specialist in addition to you? I have a talk therapist in addition, but I know that's not always good for OCD. I often catch a reassurance. For OCD, you don't need anyone else other than me. I cover everything for OCD. That's all that I specialize in OCD. Does someone need another OCD specialist? Absolutely not. We cover everything there. Now, the fear is usually this. What if one of my therapists misses something else, then I stay stuck, and it's fear and anxiety. So often a common one is one person will go to an OCD specialist. I'm not saying me. I'm saying someone goes to an OCD specialist, and then they go, what if I've got PTSD? Oh, I need another PTSD specialist. Oh, but then what if I haven't got this? Or what if that doesn't work? This is fear of fear often. Fear of being stuck in the cycle. That's what is keeping going. But if you've got a therapist and they don't understand much about OCD, and you need to get to somebody like me, because far too often what's happening is people are going along with the same things that they're learning, where that's left them stuck for a very long time because they do not have the tools to get them better often. So I think you really need to look at second opinions. If I had not done that on my journey, I certainly wouldn't have got better. There's only a very small handful of people who truly understand OCD in the world. And luckily for me, when I was doing lots of research and understanding, I got to some good ones at the time, and that's what made me build OCD Recovery. My whole life has been a 24/7 mission to bring OCD out the dark and to put it on the map and to cover everything that I thought was missed from all the different therapists around, so that it was all delivered, so that everything that I could think of that people needed for OCD I could cover. So I can't think of anything that, everything that I'm doing with OCD is specifically tailored for that. I've very rarely come across cases where I think, very rarely, it doesn't happen, because it's a case of knowing the pieces, and you've seen it all before. I never come across a case I think I don't know how to handle this. I've never seen that at all. I regularly see cases of people that have been to 10, 20 therapists, had deep brain stimulation, surgery, every kind of thing you can imagine in this planet in different parts of the world for OCD. And it's an incredibly sad story when I see it, because those people have been led from one person to another, feeling less and less hopeless, where all that was holding them back was one damn belief that they were scared of and didn't understand, and that's what's kept them trapped all this time. And sadly, someone's led them along to, like, say, deep brain stimulation, which I don't see many positive results from over all the years I've been doing this, but it's obviously going to carry on. And I think in the future there will be very different technologies and medications for OCD. But at the point we're at now, everything you need to recover is right there in what was laid out by the founders of CBT, Albert Ellis, what was laid out in the Greek and Roman philosophy by Seneca the Younger, Epictetus, Diogenes, Marcus Aurelius, to name a few. And all of it is there. When you really follow it and change your perception, you realize you don't need anything else. It's there. The Greek and Roman philosophers have laid it out for thousands of years. It's been there. It still is there. But it takes practice, and persistence to understand it and believe it. And when you do that, then you see it differently. So everything is there. There's nothing that I think of today, oh, that's drastically different to what they were laying out. It isn't, but it took time to practice it and to implement it, and there's much better ways to implement it. So that's basically where that goes. Anxiety is designed to save your life. It will cut through those meds as it should. That is a very good point, Erica, and I've got to highlight that. Have a think about that, guys, for a second. Anxiety is designed to save your life. It will cut through meds as it should. Absolutely. It doesn't want anything coming in the way of blocking you so that you might die. That's exactly what it's designed to do. Great quote, that, Erica. Really good. Let's have a look here. I have OCD, particularly about food, and have read that allergic reactions and food poisoning can happen up to 24 hours after consumption. I've tried to push boundaries before and panicking for 24 hours. I had this one. This is super common. So many have it. It is a case of learning to understand about reactions, going through the fears of the different symptoms, which we have to do. So we have to sort of chip away at it from all sides. And then about exposures to it, eating the ones you're scared of, which are normally the shellfishes and so on that can develop, and the nuts that can develop later on in our lives. Suddenly facing those so that we can really experience that. And this is super common. You'll be able to, we see all the time people who eat them and then think, shit, I can feel my mouth swelling, I can feel my tongue swelling, I can feel some bumps in my mouth. It can convince if there's anything, and then calling an ambulance, throat swelling up. I have been there. I know those ones. Exactly that is what happened to me. I did that. I've experienced that at midnight, thinking my throat swelling, called an ambulance. I've done all of these things. So these are super, super common, the allergy ones. They need practice. They definitely need exposures. But you can get through those, taking a leap into the uncertainty, feeling the uncertainty, going along with these different exposures. Great is the way to go. I'll come back. I'll cover that in another Instagram live in a lot more detail, all about foods, allergies, in relation to OCD. Let's have a look here. You caught my fear of fear. I just need to continue what I've already learned from CBT. Absolutely right, Jessica. It is that. Fear of fear. I spot it all the time. People scared of, what if I'm missing something in this therapy that I need to get from somewhere else? What if I have some other condition or so on? The same as what if I have schizophrenia, bipolar, multiple personality? It's all the same thing. You know, I work with people with all kinds of anxiety problems, from PTSD, OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder. I work with people that have all different situations of anxiety, and it doesn't matter what it is there. It's the same thing. It's the fear. It's the irrational fear of, this is the worst thing ever. It couldn't be any worse. This is so out of this world, scary, ... That is what is fueling it. It doesn't matter. I've worked with people who've been in bomb attacks. I've worked with people that have had terrible diseases that have taken them in and out of being close to dying. People from suicides that have gone wrong, to everything you can imagine. So I see all forms of anxiety, and it's all from the same thing. It's fear, irrational fears, and then the anxiety cycle going along, which, as the pioneer of anxiety, Claire Weeks, said, needs time to settle, changing our relationship with the thoughts, fears, and physical sensations, allowing the nervous system to settle down, allowing the sensitized nerves to settle. And that is very important too. Because often we'll have the question, well, I'm still bloody anxious, I've still got physical symptoms, and I'm not even scared of anything. Well, that's because the nerves are still stimulated, and you probably are a lot of the time still scared of something which is stimulating that. Let's have a look. Okay, I think that's covered most of the questions. I'm trying to keep to this Instagram live thing every day, every other day. Not every day, almost sometimes when I've got a lot of sessions in, I don't have the energy to do the Instagram lives, but I'm going to try and keep them all up. Keep an eye, I mean, that quote with what Erica said there was fantastic. I think that's a really great point. And I think the main thing that you want to think about is just think this. Think OCD recovery is not something that's easy. Have a think about that for a second. If it was easy, everyone would be absolutely recovered, telling everyone, oh, I've got better. Yes, in a lot of cases where it's a very light OCD, but not when it's been like severe chronically affecting you every day for a long time. It's not easy in the sense that it's not, it takes a lot of reading, it takes quite a lot of practice, and it takes persistence. And a lot of people don't want to do that, and a lot of people can't see that path because it's not a very well laid out path. It's getting more laid out with what I'm trying to do here and OCD awareness and so on. But it's not a well laid out path. So you can understand why. But it takes persistence. You wouldn't expect to learn French in one day. You wouldn't expect to learn to ski in half an hour. Okay? So it's really, really important, the persistence part. Now, this does not mean it's rocket science. It certainly is not rocket science. It's harder than we would want it to be. It's not rocket science. But with persistence, it is achievable to all, but you have to work at it. And the amount of work that is needed is often overlooked, so people don't do that. And also, when you've been doing it for a while, you think, God, I've been having therapy for a long time or whatever, and I've done a lot of this work. Why am I not better now? Why is it not all over? It doesn't work like that. It's not that instant. It took me a long time to get better because there was quite a lot I had to read, quite a lot I had to practice. Now, I think one of the things that you can do is have a think about it like this. Always think, well, how much has my perception changed? How much has my thinking changed? How different of a person am I to when I first started this journey of trying to work on myself and get better? Because equally with that, with how you notice that your life has changed, how you've noticed that your thinking is different and your perception is different, as that shifts and you notice big shifts in that, tends to be your OCD changes in line with that, obviously targeted towards OCD, but changes in line with that. If you think my thinking hasn't changed at all or my perception at all, it's no wonder why the OCD is in the same position. It's about a change in perception. So any other questions, guys, that you want to ask me, please send them across to this account. Direct message me. I'll be putting up more questions on Instagram stories, so you can ask me questions, and I'll be back on here with another Instagram live. I think I'll probably do the next one on a theme of some sort, covering a theme extensively, as I get asked a lot of questions to cover suicide OCD or POCD or harm OCD in more detail, false memory OCD. So I will do that. I will get round to doing that. I think it's definitely what is needed. All right, guys, thanks a lot. See you later.